So we're live. Great to be back here on another construction technology webinar. I'm Erin, host of EKC Construction Technology Webinars, and today I am joined by Carl, John, and Elon. And I will just immediately jump in and turn it over to you guys to give a brief introduction to yourself, what you're working on, and then we'll dive into the topic. So starting with Elon, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, great to be here. Thanks, Erin, for putting this together. But yeah, my name is Elon Buckman. I've worked in tech for pretty much my whole career. The last 2 years, I founded a company called Raise the Bar AI. Our mission is to help companies understand how to use AI and actually implement it to become more efficient. And a lot of the work that I've been doing revolves around the construction industry. It's a great use case because typically there's a lot of paper, a lot of unstructured documents that AI can do some processing on, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. So and I know these guys from a former employer in the construction space, and really excited to have this conversation today.
Right, awesome. Thanks, Elon. Let's next go to John and then Carl.
Sounds good. So I'm John Ream, currently the head of products at Rebuild, where we got started a little over a year ago working on AI-powered technology to help restoration contractors price out and build estimates much faster. Came from working with these fine guys at Block Renovation, and been excited to work in the construction space and apply new technology there. So excited to talk some more.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And last but not least, Carl.
Restoration contractors.
Cool. Hey, everyone. Erin, thanks for having us. Similar to the other guys, have spent the last 6 years or so working in technology space specific to the construction industry. I actually started my career in the earliest days working on site in the field as a laborer, and grew a passion for construction from that point forward. Held a number of different positions along the way, including some large-scale construction management, but ultimately have started a business called D1 Contracting, essentially helping general contractors adopt technology for their businesses, much of which that technology these days includes AI components. So super excited to be here and share with the group.
Yeah, very excited to have this group on here. You all have pretty interesting backgrounds, and I think some of the familiarity between you guys is going to lead to a really interesting discussion. So before we dive in, just a quick note to our audience that's tuned in. You can ask questions, comments, give us some feedback, share your thoughts via the comment box or the chat box, depending on what device you're tuning in on. So please do ask questions. We want you to engage, and we'll be able to see it, and I'll be able to read that out in real time. So yeah, let us know your thoughts. Use that comment chat box, and also we'd love to see some of the reactions as well. All right, so I'll dive into, our big opening topic. I think the construction industry has maybe been a little saturated with the terms AI, generative AI, but it's always kind of worth revisiting because it still is something so new to us. So what is generative AI? I say Gen AI for short. And why is it so hot right now? And feel free, anybody, to just take that up and run with it.
Yeah, I can kick us off and then you guys feel free to chime in. But, I've been thinking a lot about this, and really about 2 years ago when ChatGPT first came out, which probably everyone's used, that was really kind of my first introduction to generative AI. But in reality, artificial intelligence is a field that folks have been working on for a very long time. And there's been a lot of investment of time and resources into this project. And companies like OpenAI have been working on this, for at least a decade. It really I at least credit it to the public release of ChatGPT, where it was just kind of opened up to the world and kind of took everything over by storm. And that's been really exciting to give sort of the common everyday person access to these powerful tools. And that's really, to me, the big change is while a lot of this for the last, decade or 2 decades has been happening behind the scenes, now it's come to the forefront. But I think it also raises a really interesting question, which is, okay, well, what do we do with this technology? And given that the technology has been proliferating over so long, you've got this like very deep iceberg underneath. And I think what we'll talk about today is what most people have seen is just the tip of the iceberg. And so I think what hopefully we'll talk about today is how do we dig deeper and understand how this technology works, and then understand how to actually use it, particularly obviously in construction. But I don't know, John, Carl, anything else to add there?
I think you hit it really on the head, how ChatGPT and a lot of other things have made available to a lot of other people things that used to be really, really hard to be able to apply. Applying machine learning and AI to a company or to your work used to be a really complicated, expensive problem. And these tools have made it a lot easier to be able to integrate those into your work and find ways to plug them in to solve problems for you in a way that was just really, had a high bar to get to before. And that's really exciting to see all the different applications, particularly in an industry like construction.
I was just thinking, John, when you said complicated and expensive, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the industry, 100%. But maybe it doesn't have to be, right? So we're applying these tools strategically. I think it's easing a lot of pain for a lot of people, especially in those areas like the complexity, and also it's costly in many different ways, not just monetary, right? So yeah, it is solving a big problem, or some big problems for the industry. Let's see. So moving on, we have a general concept of AI, but if we go a level deeper, and especially with considering things like ChatGPT, we hear the term large language model, LLM. So for those who aren't as familiar, like, what the heck is an LLM? What does that mean to us when we're looking at these tools as contractors, saying like, well, what do I do? What do I do with this LLM thing?
Yeah. So if it's okay, I'm gonna share a couple thoughts that I know helped me really make sense of this. And I think it's helpful to actually understand how this technology works for a few different reasons. Well, for two main reasons. One is, I think, like any technology of any kind, software or otherwise, I think the more you know about how it works on the inside, the better you know how to use it. And the second is, I think there's a lot of controversy, polarization around this topic. And I think it's helpful to understand how these things are actually working so that you can come to the right conclusion on your own of how and when to use some of these tools. Well, I'm going to pull up share a screen here real quick. But so LLM stands for large language model. You can see this, right? This slide?
For me, I'm not sure why, because I know it worked before just fine. It looks like a black screen, but for John and
Okay,
Carl,
let me try this again.
do you see the same?
Yeah, I see it as well. Well, here we go. While I pull it up, LLM just stands for large language model, and this is really what powers the latest, what we're all using on things like ChatGPT or Claude or anything like that. Let's see here.
So while you're doing that, Elon, oh, there it goes. Actually, yeah, keep going. I'll jump back in. We have a question in the chat that I'll ask after we're done with this. Yeah.
Okay, so how does a large language model work? It really requires three different ingredients. So the first is a statistical model that lets us take language or text and turn it into numbers. And you can kind of think how this would work. You can think of, so what we're seeing here is a three-dimensional graph, which is kind of the most advanced that a human mind can process. You can even think about it as a two-dimensional graph too. Like if we were to start plotting out different sentences, one axis could be like how formal is this language, right? Super formal or super informal. And then on another axis, we could start plotting, are we talking about sports or are we talking about cooking? And right, you're going to have like some, and you can start to plot these different dots all throughout. And that's what these statistical models do, is start to cluster different parts of language. And so just the development of this model is the first key ingredient. The second key ingredient is you need just a tremendous amount of data to run through this model and start to populate this graph. And so GPT-3, the predecessor to ChatGPT that we all probably used about 2 years ago, this started as actually a research project and a white paper. So there's a lot of information about this. And as time has gone on and things have become more commercial, now things are a little bit harder to understand the inner workings of. But we have a lot of information about how GPT-3 works. And I mean, it's just tremendous the amount of data that was used to sort of train this model, equivalent to 720 million books. Pretty crazy. And then lastly, you need super high powered computing chips that can process all this data, run all this data through the model. And this is what people call training, right? This is a lot of the behind the scenes work that these big companies are doing. And it costs a tremendous amount of money. That's why these companies are raising so much money to buy these cutting edge chips that can do all this. The last thing I will mention, and I think this is really important, while it seems like an overwhelming amount of data that this model is trained on, it's actually just a very small percentage of all the data that's on the internet. And that's really important to know, because when you're using a large language model, you've got to recognize that it does not know everything and it does not have all the information. And the more you can filter down the information that you're asking it to access, the better your results will be. So one more important element of how this works. So once you've got all this working, basically what these models are trying to do is predict the next word that is going to be said. So I like to do like a little bit of an interactive activity here, and I'm going to ask the three other folks on this call to participate with me. But if I were to say, like, so just get ready to shout out, because our human brains can do this too. So if I were to say, every morning I wake up and I like to drink a nice hot cup of
coffee.
There you go. So our brains know how to do this too. And the interesting thing, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up, is like a large language model can actually produce different results, right? Because coffee is probably the first thing that comes to mind, but tea would be okay. I don't know, water would be okay, right? The options are almost endless. And so this is something to keep in mind also, that you can start to get some variance when you're using these models, similar to the way that a human would. So the last thing I'll say here is, like, hopefully this gives just a little bit of groundwork, but I think what's really important for us to understand is, while these tools are magical, it makes us feel it's very whimsical, it's amazing, it's not magic, right? There is a process behind it. It's systematic. And that's also important for us to know, so that we can sort of calm some of our fears when we use some of these models. So anyway, hopefully that helps. I don't know if anyone has there's any questions or other comments about that.
So that was a really good breakdown for me. And in just a couple minutes, right, you kind of nailed each piece, which I appreciate that so much. I'm like, wow, I got to go back and take some notes. And it's a great example of how to like translate what these AI things require in order to actually make the magic happen, right? Before I get to the question that we have, John, Carl, anything on LLMs you want to add? It's pretty comprehensive, yeah. Yeah, I like that example. So thanks for sharing that, Elon. So we have Brian. Thanks for asking this question in the chat. So this is, I think, going back to maybe how AI is branded. So he's asking, we pulled a punch and called ourselves a virtual broker, quote unquote, instead of AI. We lost points with investors, but I think we reassured an old school user base. Have you heard of other companies doing this?
John, you have a perspective here? I know you've kind of been through some of this recently.
Certainly have. Yeah, I think, definitely understand some of that perception. People, as we kind of mentioned earlier, people definitely have strong reactions when they hear about AI, and it could be positive, it could be negative, but it's definitely a flashpoint and a buzzword. And, one of the ways that I think about that is that at the end of the day, customers don't really care how a job gets done. They're trying to get a job done. And so if it's AI, if it's software, as someone who creates a software tool, AI is not the point. The benefit to the customer is the point. And so, I definitely have a lot of exciting things to talk about with AI, and it makes a lot of things possible. But, when talking about what, our software does, we talk about what it does for you, not how it does it. And if you want to talk about AI, we certainly can, and we will now. But I definitely think emphasizing the value over the means is definitely important.
I think that means a lot with the work that I see helping contractors adopt technology. Often it's best to just focus on the problems that you're solving and the user needs. there could be many different solutions. AI could be one of those. So focusing on the problems is definitely excellent way of framing it.
Yeah, I would like to add too, like from my perspective and working with a spectrum, right, of companies, individuals who are either ready, not ready, or somewhere in the middle for digital transformation or technology and innovation. I've found that just calling it a tool, like it's just another tool in your tool belt that you can use to solve the problem kind of resonates a little bit more with the industry that's kind of been building stuff for, decades. So yeah, we understand tools really well. It's kind of a natural part of building stuff. So that's at least one observation I've seen from my perspective too. So yeah, good question. All right. So, wow, a really good start to the discussion. So we've seen a bit on what is Gen AI, how does it work with, the whole LLM functionality. So we have this cool tool, right? But how do we actually use it? So, we've heard from Elon, like, yeah, it's doing magic, but in practicality, like, what are the applications that contractors today can actually get good use out of and start to solve their problems? I know there's quite a bit out there, so feel free to jump in, anybody.
Paul, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I can give a high level overview of some of the use cases that I've seen, some of the problems that these tools are solving. And I think that kind of back to the first question of like why AI now and why is it so hype, is that we're still discovering like new use cases every day. I think in a big way, we're probably solving the most challenging or most common or highest dollar value or time value tasks right now. But as each of those are solved, then there's additional layers which come from there. But at a high level, I mean, I've seen use cases of it all the way at the highest top of funnel of generating new business, whether that's branding, marketing your platform, connecting with customers, nurturing your leads, designing projects for customers, whether that's visually or through like an iterative process around scoping jobs, down to more of the delivery side, which is like reviewing construction documentation to do takeoffs, handling RFIs, change orders, and even like elements of materials procurement. There really are a ton of opportunities all across, whether it's visual design, customer interaction, or actual execution of documentation.
Okay. A lot. So we do have another question comment in the chat. Arav, who is a lead estimator, is asking, how can Gen AI be applied effectively in the construction industry? And Carl, I know you mentioned estimating. Could you expand on that use case a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. And John and Elon, feel free to, provide additional context there as well. I think estimating it depends on the use case of estimating as well. The scale of the project and whether it's off of the plans or maybe a smaller scale project where you have less of that. But in several ways, it can really help with things like reviewing plans or even doing first drafts of takeoffs, which can save a ton of time and effort. And it can also be very helpful in generating scope. My level of comfort and most of the comfort I've seen from contractors I work with is that it's definitely a human in the loop process still, but it provides a really, really sound first draft and often makes recommendations or suggestions of things that maybe wouldn't be within an estimator's typical tool belt to consider for a project.
100%. I've seen some instances too where like it's getting even more sophisticated. So it's like, hey, you can almost prompt your drawing set, like, tell me what I'm missing here, or what are the biggest risks with maybe potentially doing this job. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. John, it looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, we our primary output that we help contractors produce is estimates, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about how to work in more and more technology. And I think some of the recent developments, 4.0 and chain of reasoning type things, very similar to what you described, are able to help get processes better, able to give you more reliable, higher quality outputs. But it's also, like Carl mentioned, definitely something where you have to understand where you're going to get some variation and where there are risks in your process. And you've got to help to manage, where are you okay with AI giving you, variable results? And where are you looking for very specific things? And I think it can be very helpful in helping you pull in lots of different information to apply to a different situation, but you also have to put in checks and balances to make sure it's going to do its job in a way that works for you.
Very nice. So two things, 4.0 meaning ChatGPT model 4.0,
Yes.
and then chain reasoning. Could you just expand a little bit on that? Selfishly for me, I'm like, I haven't often heard that term. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the big developments in the AI space this year was the release, or I suppose last year, was the release of ChatGPT 4.0 model, which takes advantage of chain of reasoning, which was definitely something that was well researched, using different LLMs, prompting them to think in different steps and evaluate their results at different steps as. And one of the great results of that was that it was able to catch itself making mistakes. And so some of these things take a little bit longer, but they're able to give you a higher quality result than you were getting from a lot of these things before. And it's more complex. It takes some more thinking, but it's added a big leap in reasoning capabilities for a lot of these tools.
That's very good to know. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, the sophistication, I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm always surprised with like how far it can just leap ahead with the capabilities. So excellent to know.
One
Iman,
thought I'll just
anything?
add, yeah, back to the question of like how can it be used. Personally, I think the group that has some of the most to benefit from generative AI are small and mid-sized businesses, and the reason is that large businesses, one, have been able to invest in their own proprietary AI technology. So, like back to John's comment, like this stuff, it used to be very hard to spin up a machine learning model, but now anybody can have a machine learning model. So some of these big companies used to have this. And then the other thing that big companies have done for a very long time is this concept of like shared services, where you have a bunch of different departments who specialize in things like marketing and legal and finance. And then whoever in the company needs to use like those services can reach out to them. And that's not something that, smaller mid-sized businesses have been able to do. But AI really changes that, because you can sort of pre-train different models. And this is even as basic as things like you can do with custom GPTs. You can teach a GPT, like, here's the way that I like to, write my RFIs, for example. And here's like past RFIs that I've written. And here's my writing style. And so that becomes like almost like a shared service for your business. Or you could set up like a marketing department, so to speak, if you're going to do, I don't know, email outreach, or, to write your copy. You can start to build out these little, a term that's thrown around a lot in the AI world is agents, and set up these different agents that can do different things for your business. So all of a sudden you can operate a small business like this, the same way a big one does. And I think that gives construction companies a lot of benefit. So I would encourage folks to think about like, what are some of those things that you could, that you might want to have a first draft done of. So I agree with Carl, like, the level of reasoning, it's improving with models like O1 and things like that, but it's not to the level that most contractors would want to just like outsource their quoting or anything like that to these types of things. But taking some inputs, maybe, taking a bunch of different data and like putting a first draft together, that could be a really great use of AI that could save you a lot of time.
Absolutely. And we're getting a bit of good commentary here in the chat. So follow-up question from Arav. How long does it typically take for us to see tangible results after applying generative AI in construction? And I'll actually kick this one off. So for me, I think it was you, John, who mentioned the complexity and the expensiveness of the industry. I think the time to find results from applying AI is also related to how complex and how expensive the task is that you're challenging. So the example I like to use is you can use a tool to say like, hey, summarize or generate a meeting summary of these meeting notes that happened during this meeting. So you have pretty much immediate value. You get something that should be a somewhat quality product in seconds compared to, minutes or hours. So that's one example. But if we're talking about being able to, I don't know, come up with like a perfect something or other for construction and be able to magically identify schedules and risks and have the perfect job, that's a pretty big task. It might take a longer time to realize that value. So I also want to get other thoughts on it though as well. So yeah, time to value for applying Gen AI.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really key there, which is starting specific and thinking about how to solve very specific problems at a time. Our company, we're not trying to do estimating in general. We're trying to do very specific part of restoration estimating. And you want to focus in on how you're doing that, how you want to structure your approach to each specific problem and try to understand what success looks like, what failure could look like for an AI solution in there, test it, try it, measure it, and then take on other problems.
Any additional thoughts?
I was going to say one of the challenges I think of understanding the time to value is also having the right baseline. So some of these businesses often don't have a clear baseline of like what is their cost of dealing with I don't know, maybe reviewing submittals on a project. Like it's part of the overall larger budget. Like Erin, you said as well, like many of these things, when you use an AI application, there's like an instant result, but it's hard to quantify whether that allows you to save time and those resources are allocated other places, or you can have fewer people doing the same thing that they had to do previously. It takes a longer time to see those actual results and even to be able to compare against what your baseline was previously if you don't have a good baseline established.
Insightful. Yeah. I think we don't often evaluate where we're at currently to see where those gaps exist to like the potential place that we can be. So yeah, 100%.
One other thing I'd add, I think Gen AI lets you do things and lets you learn how to do things that you never knew how to do before. So, and that I think has a pretty quick ROI on it. Like one that comes to mind is legal documents. Now, Gen AI is not a alternative to a lawyer, but it can draft documents for you, or if you're in a sticky situation, it can draft letters for you and make sure that it's following certain protocols. That could save you a couple $100 just in like asking a lawyer to draft something. And I think it's also important to find folks on the other side, like lawyers, for example, who are comfortable with you saying like, hey, I drafted this with ChatGPT. Can you take a look? And even doing that will save you a lot of money because they're not going to have either them or their paralegal do it. The other thing that I do a lot is, I don't know for computer-based tasks, I use Claude a lot. So Claude is, I think, generally agreed to be a little bit better on computer-based tasks, things like coding, different things like that. And they released like a few months ago a demo of how Claude can actually control a computer, which is very cool. But the takeaway that I had from it is actually, and this kind of gets back to my comment before of like knowing how things work. If you look at how it actually works, what it's actually doing is taking screenshots of your computer and feeding it to the model and basically saying like, what do I do next? What do I do next? And so I've started to do that manually, where I'll be working on something. Maybe I'm using a software. Maybe you're trying to like set up Facebook ads or something for the first time and you've never done it. What I would suggest, what I would do is take screenshots of your computer and just constantly say like, okay, what do I do next? Does this look right? You'll be amazed by what it'll be able to do for you. And that'll let you avoid things like using outsourced agencies or different things like that.
Wow, I haven't heard that use case before. So thanks for sharing that. That's a cool one. And when you said the legal example, that actually sparked a thought as well. So in the construction industry, we say trust but verify for when we're placing work in the field. The same thing goes for using AI applications, right? So we're trusting it to some extent to give us back information and results that's useful and hopefully accurate. But you still need to have that verification step. So humans, we're not going away. We still need to double check it. I like to put out there for some of the audiences that I speak to, like, yeah, just think about it as like a super intelligent toddler, right? So it's going to give you like a bunch of really smart stuff back, but like it's still a toddler. So just double check it, make sure it's in line with industry standards and safety and all that good stuff. So yeah. So lots of good commentary in the chat here. I do want to read out some of it. So Tiffany is mentioning, I thought the world was ending this morning. ChatGPT was down for a few hours. The backend was still functioning in our workflows, but the interface was still down. So that takes me back to like, yeah, it's a tool. Sometimes tools break or something goes wrong. So always have a backup, I guess. Any other thoughts on that from the group? I see a lot of head nods.
I just think it's funny when I have the same feeling as Tiffany. Like when these things go down, I'm a little bit at a loss. I think like, you know, I was born at the tail end of the 80s and can sort of remember when the internet was coming up. And I think that is a very helpful comparison point, because in the beginning of the internet, I don't think we really knew. No one could predict what has happened now. If the social media, different, you know, all the things that have kind of spread. Yeah. And similarly, there are days that there have been times where like AWS, which powers the bulk of different things online, goes down, and there's not a whole lot of work that gets done. And, you know, I think a similar thing will kind of happen here. But I always like to have that reference point because I think it's recent enough that we can remember it, and it's big enough of a change that I think is similar to our use of AI now.
Yeah, I appreciate the comparison to like pre-internet times. So yeah, we didn't always used to work this way. I think that's a good reminder that we've found a lot of value in some really crazy stuff that's coming out. So, but it doesn't hurt. It's a good practice to know the foundations. Yeah. All right. So another pretty interesting question here. So David is saying, we have been working on gathering data from work in the field into a database that will allow PMs, APM supers to query based on a local instance, such as progress of east wall, and then it compares to the BIM instance. Also safety versus productivity. Using AI in real time where the work is done. What are your thoughts on this? So kind of a big, interesting comment there from David. Using a vector database locally.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's a substantial project. I think half of, you know, any AI project is getting your data together. Like Carl was saying, setting up a baseline is half your battle, and getting your information in a usable state is also critical to do kind of the things that Ilham was talking about, managing, you know, the data to work for you. So that's awesome. Getting that set up can be hugely impactful. Curious to hear how it's going.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, David. My thought on this, I am probably a bit more so interested in the culture of the field side, because we can make these great tools, but if we're not really using them and using them in the right way, they can only take you so far. So I'm super curious to see how the field teams feel about querying something to get information. Is there extra training that's going on to do prompt engineering to let them know exactly how to interact with the database? So I'm so curious on that cultural aspect, because I've always found that the biggest gap is, you know, hands on keyboard, right? Are the team members actually inputting and getting the data out in a way that they need to? So yeah, a really great use case. That was shared there. So thanks, David, for sharing that.
Yeah. One more thing I'll add, like it's actually, David brings up a good point. Like there's so many different implementations of AI, and AI is just kind of like a big broad bucket. I think what David's talking about is what's called like an embeddings model to it's basically the first step in that process that I mentioned, where you're like categorizing text and you can match it up. That's, I would say, a more like you're going to get less variance And so, if folks have had experiences where they're using large language models to like draft, I don't know, emails or, and you're getting frustrated by the fact that every time you generate it, it's going to come out different. There are ways to implement it so you'll have a little bit more consistency and you using more of an algorithmic approach. So without getting too much into the details, I think the thing I want to say is like, there's not a one size fits all. And there's a lot of tools in this toolbox that we're calling AI. And so I would just encourage folks to like stay curious, try different things. And, like you were saying, Erin, like different applications, you also have to know the culture of the end user. And so depending on your end user and your use case, you got to, like anything, you got to find the right tool for the job.
Absolutely. So a bunch more commentary. I'm just going to kind of go through since we have a lot of good engagement here. And this is just a comment, I think, adding to some of what we were just talking about before. So Pierre is mentioning it's important to be critical of the output. I found the test/check is usually 3 to 5 times. Equally, the core knowledge is crucial for the integrity of the output. Buildability needs experience. So I couldn't agree more with that. I think it also kind of highlights a big risk that we're going through industry-wide. I think no matter where or what you're building, that we're actually losing a lot of the builder's knowledge and experienced, builders that have been in the field for, more than just a few decades. It's been their entire lives, and they're either, just retiring out or, the knowledge is just being not transferred back down. So thoughts on that comment?
That comment definitely resonates. And Erin, you said trust but verify earlier. There's also the term human in the loop. The version of that comment sounds like measure 5 times, cut once.
Yes, yes.
Same
Yeah.
versions. But yeah, you definitely highlighted a real challenge there, which is labor shortages across the industry, which is a much larger macro factor than just AI itself. And there's likely are, and I've heard of some applications of AI for training individuals, but I have less information on how those have developed versus the core use cases for project execution.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see the training use cases come out, because to me, that's like a perfect application of AI to database or download a whole bunch of information, put it in a format that somebody can easily get up to speed on and start driving value. So yeah, good commentary. A comment from Tiffany: we are using AI to create user-friendly reports from analytics dashboards, since some people don't digest dashboards well. That's pretty insightful. I have seen that problem myself where the dashboard doesn't, I don't know, some people just don't click with it, but they really appreciate their regular old report. Thoughts on using AI on doing that?
I think that ties really nicely to, Erin, something you said before about the culture in different places and how you need to make sure your application is working for the team that's using it. And AI makes it possible to design things differently than they've been used in the past, because the tools will be smarter. They'll have better knowledge baked into there. You can really design things that make things simple and easy in the way that people want to work. And so I think one of the most important things you can do is really understand, how do people want to consume this information, or how, in a best case, would they have things presented to them and interact with a bit of software. And AI makes it more possible than ever to design something that works close to that ideal. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. Know your audience. Yeah, 100%. So I want to shift the discussion a little bit. We've talked a lot about use cases. We've heard a lot of good use cases from those that are tuning in. But for businesses that don't really have anything with AI and they're wondering, how do I get started? How do they actually start evaluating and getting the right tools into their organization?
Elon, this might be a good one for you to start with.
Sure. I think, yeah, there's so many tools out there, and I think it's also helpful that maybe I'll just mention just for a second, like the different sort of groupings of tools. You've got a few things that are called foundational models. These are the models and groups of models. So like OpenAI produces foundational models, Anthropic, Mistral. There's like 4 or 5 different of them. So those are the foundational models that really power all of this underneath. So let's say you got 5 of those. There's thousands of AI-based applications that all use those models to do different things. And so you've got things that you can kind of sign up for and subscribe. And then you can make your own custom, right? You could, if you're using your own application, which now gets easier and easier with tools like Lovable, which is a cool one if you want to check it out, where you can just like describe what kind of app you want to create and it'll create it for you.
What's the name of that
so
one? I gotta.
It's a weird name.
Lovable?
Lovable.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
That's a cool one. Like there's Vercel has one. It's called V0, and there's going to be more and more of these. The idea is just making it easier to create software. So I think so. You kind of have like, to me, there's like 3 categories. You can like build your own thing from scratch using a foundational model. You could sign up for a tool that exists, or you can use this like intermediary where you're using AI tools to create other AI tools. I think there's no one size fits all. I think the biggest thing comes down to what's your comfort level with tinkering. I would say the further up, like closer to the foundational model directly, is harder and takes more expertise. And the lower down you go, like if you're using, a software subscription that's already set up to do like exactly the task you want, that could be a little bit more plug and play. So I think, so I would say, comes back to like this classic build versus buy question. My general recommendation is that if something exists, use it. And then if it doesn't, then you might have to think about creating it yourself or partnering with someone to create it. But I don't know, that's my initial thought on that.
Yeah, I'm big on the partnerships. Construction, again, is a complex business. A lot of stuff that's off the shelf on the market doesn't quite address it. Maybe gets a little bit close, but not quite. But if you bring the contractor knowledge plus the tech expertise from a tech company, then you start really cooking up some good stuff. So, yeah. Okay. So I want to ask, like, to put it into like some clear terms, or like really easy maybe to remember, like lists, like what are the top 3 things that you guys would say might be a little bit of a red flag or something to double check when looking at AI solutions? Or one. Let's make it just one. Yeah.
One came to mind quickly for me, which is maybe 2 different ways of saying the same thing, but is moving forward with a solution that might solve an immediate problem, but that you might grow out of in the future.
Oh.
And I think there's 2 ways you can grow out of it. It's like picking a service provider that does one very niche thing, but you're going to want to do 4 or 5 different unique things with AI in the future. That's a challenge. And then the other piece of that is if you move forward with a solution that isn't constantly getting better as the models continue to evolve, then you will quickly be like wedded to a solution which is no longer top notch compared to other things in the market.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like, is it actually solving the problem or is it a Band-Aid?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe John next. You have
I'll piggyback on that for a second. I think for those of us who are building AI-powered tools, I think that problem of keeping up with the developments is absolutely essential and top of mind. And so if you're buying software from somebody who's making this, absolutely ask them how they're doing that. Because, OpenAI and Google and many others are spending billions and billions of dollars trying to make these things better and better, and they're going to. And so you need to be able to find a way to take advantage of that, massive investment in these tools improving. You got to be able to keep up with that. I suppose another big red flag is, I suppose this ties even to how to set up, like, getting started with these, but you want to be able to understand what your variance tolerance is in the results. You got to think at the start, all right, how much unpredictability am I willing to have in this task? And set some good measures to understand what am I going to get with this and how reliable is it? And, for us, we try to figure out good ways to set off alarm bells and build the system so that it's actually self-healing. When you have a problem, it can identify and correct. But AI solution can be that big red flag if it's going to be giving you results that are too variable to trust.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. I love the way you said that. And also threw in like the self-healing component, self-healing AI. What a concept. All right. Elon, any last thoughts on, things to stay away from, maybe?
I think a lot about the data, because I think that a lot of the AI models are sort of becoming a commodity. It's not just me who thinks this either. What differentiates these different services is the data they have access to. And so in terms of red flags, I would say a big red flag is if you're going to use a tool, but you don't own the data, or somehow that's a big red flag. And I would encourage anybody who's using AI right now, and especially if you're concerned about what does the future look like, preserving your data and having data on your own business that could then be used by an AI model is incredibly valuable, and no one else can build your data set, right? So I would definitely make sure that you have control over your data. And the second thing, just something to keep an eye out of, I wouldn't call it a red flag, but most of these tools by default will they can train on your data. But most of these tools also have a very easy opt-out toggle. And so if that's something that you're, concerned about, that, for example, OpenAI is going to start ingesting your construction pricing data, it's pretty easy to turn that off. And that's just something as you're evaluating different options, it might be something that you want to ask about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's almost just good practice for any tech tool that's digital. Yeah. Keep an eye on your data, where it's going, how it's being used. Absolutely. So we're, I guess, in the last 13 minutes-ish or so of the discussion today. Just a final reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, comments, now is a good time to get those into the chat so that we can pick them up before we close out for today. So there are a couple other comments in here. Let's see. So Pierre, again, I think following up with one of the previous discussions, construction is not just a massing model. The manufacture, fabrication, assembly need manual aspects. This knowledge is getting lost without being on site and touching materials. An observation. Yeah, 100%. So I think what was it, like human in the loop, right? We hear that phrase come up all the time. There's no way any sort of GPT, AI technology, you name it, is going to do anything in construction, right? We still need people. It's a good observation there, Pierre. Any additional thoughts on that?
One thing that comes to mind is almost like flipping the mindset there as well, which is how could AI potentially enhance the human in the field experience? And whether that's back to the question of training, somebody can experience visiting 10 job sites in a day, and what the materials and how they move about the job site and how they're installed and that type of thing. And maybe they can experience that at a much higher level in some use case of AI that's further beyond just a human going from manufacturing facility onto a site as well. I'm not sure that exists yet, but I can imagine that becoming a future use case for the education component.
On that future note, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, I was just gonna say, curious what each of your thoughts are for the future of, Gen AI in construction. It's transformed so quickly, and it almost feels like we're running a constant sprint to try to catch up with it. But what can we maybe anticipate for the next 5 years or so?
Actually, that relates to the thought I had that based off of Carl's comment. I could see AI allowing people to spend a lot more time on site and less time doing sort of back office processing. I know that's the area that I focus on the most, is how do we just devote as much time, and this is in construction, but other businesses as well, on our customers and the core product that we're delivering. And so if you can spend more time on site talking, talking to your laborers or talking to your customer, and less time, writing up estimates or, change orders and things like that, I think everyone has a lot to benefit from that. We don't build a lot of valuable experience by, jockeying spreadsheets, but we do get valuable experience by talking to people and being on a job site and solving physical problems. And while there is some, there are definitely companies out there who are working on, solutions like robots that can hang drywall and things like that. Those are still very far away. And I think there's like big economic challenges there of making it feasible. But in the meantime, I would say just like think about how can AI get you away from your desk and make another thing that I talk a lot about with construction folks.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time in your vehicle. And if you can use AI assistants to like talk to your, AI assistant, tell them what you just saw on a job site and send an email to this person, like you can make your time much more actionable. And I think that's, so to me, like next 5 years, I think we're going to see a lot more hands-on customer facing experiences from the construction industry.
Wow. Yeah. I'm so excited for that future too, where we're not just stuck in an office, doing change orders and RFIs and sending emails. Like we can actually let a tech tool, robot, whatever, AI, handle some of that mundane stuff and really allow people to shine where they should be. Absolutely. John, Carl, any last thoughts on that theme?
I have one quick thought on it. I'm a big believer in the talk to scope or talk to do any other action. So Elon took that one right out of my mouth. But another version of that I think I primarily work with, smaller or mid-sized general contractors. So a lot of the work is done by an owner or a small team of people. And things like predictive effort is often they just don't have time to think that way. And so I think a very important use case as actions become more trusted and repeatable and the outcomes are easy to use for everyone, then I think another use case for these business owners and contractors will be predictive analytics, like getting ahead of something that you might need to reach out to a customer about or reach out to a supplier or anything else like that in the future.
All right. John, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of great things were just mentioned there. I think one of the big things that I think is going to change a lot is, to Alon's point about having to go back to the office, put something together, and we'll get back to you in a couple of days. I think anytime where you have to say, we're going to get back to you in a couple of days can change a lot. Being able to have information at your fingertips, and whether that's, things you have to go look up or go put together and spend time in spreadsheets, a lot of that can be made available on demand. And I think, in 5 years, we're going to have a lot less people saying, oh, let me get back to you on that, and more just like, give me a second and you'll have that answer.
Yeah, I just thought of like we used to have Blockbuster and now we don't because everything's on demand now. So yeah, I wonder what the construction world will look like if we, sorry to Blockbuster, but like, I guess graduate from the Blockbuster era of construction. So really good discussion. So we're in the last few minutes. I do want to ask each of you if anybody who's listening in or maybe tuning in later is curious about, learning a little bit more about what you're working on, how can they find you, or what's the best place for them to reach out? Maybe starting with, let's maybe go backwards with John, then Carl, then Elon.
Sure. So LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach out to me. Shoot me a message. We're very early stage, and I'm always excited to talk to people about what we're working on and what, how these solutions can be applied to more and more use cases. Particularly if you're a restoration contractor, reach out. I'd love to talk to you.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Carl?
I would say, yeah, reach out on LinkedIn as well. I'm active with my messages, so I'll try to get back to you. It'd be uncharacteristic if I missed one. So good to hear from people.
All righty. Last but not least, Elon.
Yeah, same here. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Send me just a little message saying you're on this call just so I know. But I do, I do different, anything from like coaching and training all the way to like systems implementation. I'm also working on a experimental product right now that helps
Ooh.
companies automate their back office operations. So if you have tasks that you want automated, reach out. I'd be happy to set you up with that as well.
That sounds really interesting. So thank you guys for sharing your time. For the audience that's here and anybody else that's tuning in, the recording will stay live on the event page. I know we technically do have a couple minutes left here. I'm just going to hang on and see if there are any last minute questions. I don't think I saw anything else come through that seemed quite burning, but the recording will stay live. This comment page will stay live as well. So if you have any follow-up questions, that's a good place to source your question. Or these guys have shared, their messages are open on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. So I have definitely appreciated this conversation. The three of you are super sharp, super smart, and making some really big waves in the industry, I think, with with moving us forward. So I learned a bit. I'm looking forward to seeing what's to come. And thank you again for your time.
Awesome.
Thanks, Erin. This was great. Thanks for everyone who joined.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, everybody.